Welcome aboard and welcome back to the Pirate Therapist Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Perry, and I am the Pirate Therapist. So let's do a quick check in right out of the gate. If you're listening to this episode right now while simultaneously washing dishes or scrolling through your phone, writing an email in your head, or trying to remember exactly where you put your squirrel 10 seconds ago, you are in the exact right place. If you clicked on this episode because the title had ADHD in it, there's a very good chance your brain is currently running like a web browser with 47 tabs open, music playing from one of them, and you have no idea where the sound is coming from. Maybe you have a formal ADHD diagnosis. Maybe you're an adult who is just now starting to realize, hey, wait a second, my brain has always worked differently than everyone else's. Or maybe you love someone with ADHD and you're desperately trying to figure out how to help them or just kind of coexist with them and navigate the world with someone who has ADHD. Well, whoever you are, go ahead and drop the anchor. Take a breath with me and understand that I know how exhausted you may be. Now, before we go further, I want to introduce you to my ADHD brain. His name is Skitters. Now, you may have noticed that I use a lot of pictures of squirrels as cover art for the podcast episodes. Well, they represent Skitters, my ADHD brain. Every pirate captain needs an animal companion or familiar, if you will. Well, instead of a parrot or a monkey, I thought with my ADHD, I'd have a squirrel. If you knew me personally, you'd know that a squirrel fits me pretty well. If we've ever talked face to face or in person, you may have noticed me wandering off from one topic to another without any kind of necessarily coherent path from one to the other. Anyway, may I introduce you to Skitters? Skitters, take a bow. Good job. Skitters the pirate squirrel. Incidentally, this episode is slow in coming today because Skitters ran off and I couldn't find him. I put him where he would be ready to go, and clearly he moved because I wasn't able to find him when I was ready to start. So, being a bit of a prankster that he is, it delayed things just a little bit, so not too bad. Anyway, what do you think, Skitters? Has nothing to say. So, let's get into this today. Today, obviously, we're talking about the ADHD brain. We're going to do it in a pirate therapist way. Are you still here? You want to go sit over there and wait patiently? No? Please go over there. This is distracting. You going to go? Really? Please? All right, I guess he's gone. So, today we're talking about ADHD brain. If you're looking for advice on ADHD out in the world, you usually find two extremes. One side treats ADHD like it's a terrible deficit, a broken brain that just needs to be forced to sit still, to use a color-coded planner and to just try harder. Well, the other side of that spectrum swings the pendulum all the other way into toxic positivity. And if you're currently paralyzed on your couch because of the fright of folding laundry, the thought of folding laundry feels like you're climbing Mount Everest, where someone telling you that your brain is a superpower just makes you want to scream. Well, as in most things, this particular knife cuts both ways. It can be a very useful tool, but it always comes at a cost. So we, in a sense, reject both of these ideas on this ship. ADHD is not a broken brain, but it's not exactly a superpower. It's simply a completely different operating system. It means that you are sailing the ocean with a very specific and highly complex engine that doesn't run on the normal fuel that the rest of the world uses. And today, we're going to talk about how that engine actually works, why you're so burned out, and how we can stop fighting the current and start sailing with your brain instead of against it. So let's talk about me and my ADHD for a little bit. Okay. I want to share a couple of stories with you. I always struggled in school. I always had a hard time. Sometimes I would do my work, sometimes I wouldn't in high school. And I was told that I had ADHD, to which my parents responded, no, you don't. Okay, I don't. Well, as time went on, I graduated high school. Not a very good GPA. I think it was about a 2.0. And I was really struggling. I never intended to go to college because school was just so hard for me. And I loved learning, always loved learning, but I always struggled in school. Well, when I was in college, I had a number of professors talk to me about ADHD and ask me if I'd ever been diagnosed, to which my response was, no, I don't have ADHD. And the first few professors were like, "Oh, okay," and they just let it go. Then I had one professor and she's like, "Well, how do you have you ever sat down with someone? Have you been examined for ADHD?" And I said, "No." And then she says, "Well, how do you know you don't have ADHD?" And then the words started to come out of my mouth and I heard them like it was the first time because my parents told me I didn't. And then, the light bulb bing clicked on and rather eye-opening moment. So I decided at that point that I needed to go get screened for ADHD. And I did this because my grades were not awesome. I was struggling, and the professors were trying to help, even the first ones that just let it go when I told them I didn't have ADHD. But this one got me to see that I should probably get checked. And when I got checked, I was told that I have a severe case of ADHD, which made a lot of sense. Well, they put me on some ADHD meds. And by the time I graduated college, I went from 2 something to a 3.98 GPA, which I was okay with. Anyway, it helped me out a lot in school to be able to address it instead of just avoid it. So let's talk about some of the ADHD difficulties I've had in social circles. I still have. For me, socializing, I'm an extrovert, so socializing is something I really enjoy doing. But because of the ADHD thing, where I sometimes say things before I think about it, I get really excited about things that make everybody else go, man, that dude's weird. I feel like social situations are quite often awkward because of that. And that causes problems. It makes me very self-conscious and it makes other people think I'm just a really odd duck. And I am, and I'm okay with that. But it makes socializing a bit more difficult for me than I would think it is or hope it is for most people. Another thing I wanted to address is some of the things that I was told by adults as a child growing up with ADHD. And some of this, my parents or teachers or my friends' parents. When I was in the third grade, I loved school, loved school in the beginning. And then in the third grade, we were goofing off in gym class, and the teacher got mad at me and she told me to go sit in the corner. And she says, "You will never amount to anything in this life because you will never sit still or take anything seriously." And that just crushed me. I can pinpoint to the moment. That's the moment where school became a real struggle for me, where it was really hard for me to focus. And well, it was always hard for me to focus, but it took the love of school out of me. And then I was very self conscious after that when it came to school. I've had parents come to me and tell me to knock it off, to behave myself, to just buckle down and focus. And these didn't really work. But what they did do was make me very self conscious. And I understand. I mean, as an adult, I can look at what those adults were observing and I can see that it was a struggle for them to deal with me and my bouncing all over the place and my jumping from thing to thing and running all over the place. Even at work, sometimes coworkers are like, "Where are you going to lunch?" And I'm like, I'll go to Wendy's. I want to go to Wendy's." And then I'll come back with something different. And they're like, "I thought you were going to Wendy's." And I'm like, "Well, I was." But then while I was driving the few blocks to Wendy's, something else sounded better. I saw something and I'm like, "Ooh, that looks good." And so I went there instead. It happens. It's not that big a deal, but it does create a bit of self consciousness. And so we're going to talk about ADHD today and talk about whether you have it or whether you're living with somebody who has it and what do we do and what is it. To understand why your brain does the things it does, we have to go below decks and talk to the actual mechanics of ADHD. I promise I'm not going to get too technical, but you need to know this so you can stop blaming your character for something that is actually just chemistry. The core issue of the ADHD brain is dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical in your brain that controls reward, motivation, satisfaction. In a neurotypical brain, there is a steady, reliable baseline of dopamine. But in an ADHD brain, the dopamine tank kind of the brain of an ADHD person, the dopamine tank runs on empty. So they're always chasing. But Here's the pirate therapist way to look at it, okay? Dopamine is the wind in your sails. For a neurotypical person, there's a constant, gentle breeze. And when they need to do a boring everyday task like paying a bill or folding laundry or answering a mundane email, their brain generates enough of a breeze to push the ship forward and get it done. But an ADHD brain is a ship sitting in a completely stagnant, windless waters. And if you look at a pile of laundry, your brain produces absolutely zero wind. You can stand at the wheel, screaming at the sails to move, telling yourself how lazy you are, but the ship physically cannot go forward. You are stranded in the doldrums. Because you have no baseline wind, your brain gets desperate. An ADHD brain is constantly starving for dopamine, which means it is constantly hunting for a storm. It hunts for anything that will generate enough wind to move the ship. And this is why you suddenly feel incredibly motivated to clean your entire house 5 minutes before a guest arrives. That panic, that urgency, that is the sudden massive gust of wind. This is also why ADHD brains are drawn to novelty or intense hobbies, starting new businesses, or even picking a fight with a partner. High stress situations, absolute panic, and shiny new obsessions are the only things that generate enough dopamine to fill the sails. We manufacture chaos because chaos is often the only wind we have. When you understand this, things change. You realize you aren't broken, you're not lazy, you're just a captain trying to sail a massive ship without any wind. When you find yourself paralyzed on the couch and unable to start a task, I want you to stop calling yourself a failure. I want you to look at the task and say, well, of course I can't start this right now. There's no wind for this. Once we stop fighting the reality of our brain chemistry, we can start finding creative and healthy ways to catch a breeze. So let's talk about executive dysfunction. Now that we know that the wind is gone, we have to talk about the second biggest hurdle for the ADHD brain, executive dysfunction. If you have ADHD, I guarantee that someone has called you lazy at some point in your life. You've probably called yourself lazy 1,000 times. Because from the outside, executive dysfunction looks exactly like laziness. But from the inside, it's pure, exhausting paralysis. So let's go back to our ship. The front part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, this is where the captain's quarters are. It's where all the executive functions live: planning, organizing, prioritizing, initiating tasks. In a neurotypical brain, the captain looks at a messy kitchen, decides to clean it, and immediately sends an order down to the crew. The crew starts scrubbing the deck. The bridge in between the captain's orders and the crew's actions are perfectly intact. In an ADHD brain, the captain is completely awake and aware. You're standing up in the captain's quarters, looking at the messy kitchen. You know you need to clean it. You want to clean it. You even have the steps planned out in your head. But when you try to send the order to the crew, nothing happens. That bridge between the captain's quarters and the rest of the ship, it's out. The communication line is broken. This is the agonizing reality of executive dysfunction. You are trapped inside your own head, screaming at your body just to stand up and do the thing, but your body's not moving. Laziness is looking at a messy kitchen and saying, I don't care. I'm just going to relax. That's laziness. Laziness is enjoyable. Executive dysfunction is looking at a messy kitchen, desperately wanting it to be clean, and sitting on the couch for 2 hours, trapped in a spiral of guilt and shame because you physically are unable to force yourself to start. There is nothing enjoyable about it. It's just exhausting, but from the outside, you're just sitting there. You need to hear this loud and clear, please. If you are actively distressed by the fact that you aren't doing the task, it's not because you're lazy. You are experiencing a breakdown of executive function. Your captain is doing their job. They just don't have a working radio to talk to the crew. When we understand this, we can stop whipping ourselves with shame and start to build workarounds like artificial urgency and micro wins. Micro wins, WINS, not wins. But we do this to bypass the broken bridge entirely. We've talked about the dopamine and the executive dysfunction, which are the things that people usually associate with ADHD. The focus, the motivation, the doing. But there's a massive, incredibly painful part of ADHD that rarely gets talked about. And that's the emotional toll for the person with ADHD. If you have ADHD, your emotions do not have a volume dial. They have an on off switch. And when they're on, they're playing at maximum volume through concert speakers. This extreme emotional intensity is deeply tied to something we call rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. And if you have never heard of this term before, I want you to listen closely because it might explain your life just a little bit. Dysphoria literally means unbearable pain. Rejection sensitive dysphoria is an extreme, overwhelming emotional pain triggered by the perception that you have been rejected, criticized, or that you have failed someone. Notice I said the perception of rejection. The rejection doesn't even have to be real. If your boss sends you an email that says, "Hey, can we chat for 5 minutes at noon?" The neurotypical brain says, "Okay, quick meeting." An ADHD brain with RSD immediately spirals into full blown panic. Your brain is screaming, "I'm going to get fired. I did something awful. Everybody hates me." Your nervous system goes into complete fight or flight mode over an email. When someone with ADHD is criticized, even gently, it doesn't just hurt their feelings, it feels like taking a cannonball to the hull of your ship. The pain can be physical. It takes your breath away. It triggers a massive wave of shame that tells you I am fundamentally flawed. I'm a burden. Nobody actually really truly likes me. And this is why so many people with ADHD become massive people pleasers. You become a chameleon. You bend over backwards, you overcommit yourself, and you burn out trying to keep everyone perfectly happy because your brain knows that if you make a mistake and someone gets upset with you, the pain of RSD is going to be unbearable. If you live with RSD, I need to validate the absolute exhaustion that you're carrying. Walking around every day, constantly scanning the horizon for the slightest hint of disapproval, it takes a massive toll on your mental health. You're not being too sensitive and you're not overreacting. Your brain is literally processing emotional pain at a volume that neurotypical people do not experience. When that wave of RSD hits, I want you to take a second and drop anchor. Remind yourself, this is my ADHD. This feeling is real, but the story it's telling me right now is not true. I am safe. Learning to ride out the wave of RSD without letting it sink your ship is one of the more difficult things an ADHD captain can do. So let's talk for a second about masking. What is masking? Well, masking is what happens when someone with ADHD learns to perform a version of themselves that looks more acceptable to the outside world. It can be conscious or unconscious, and it can usually develop as a way to hide symptoms and avoid criticism. It's a way to look more normal at school or work or in your relationship. In simple terms, masking is not the same as healing. It isn't your brain becoming easier to manage. It's you becoming skilled at hiding how hard things actually are. The pirate therapist version of masking is painting the ship so no one notices that there's holes in your hull. From the shore, everyone says, "What a beautiful ship. You seem to be doing great." While below decks, you're bailing water with both hands and praying nobody sees how much effort it takes just to stay afloat. And that is why masking can be so confusing. Other people see competence, but what they do not see is the strain, the rehearsal, the self monitoring, the constant effort it takes to keep that performance going. Masking can look like forcing yourself to sit perfectly still in a meeting when your body wants to get up and move. It's rehearsing what you're going to say so no one notices you lost the thread. Taking notes mainly to appear organized, or over preparing because you're too terrified that something will slip through the cracks. It can also look like suppressing fidgeting or copying how other people act, turning hyperfocus into an extra output to cover inconsistent performance, or building elaborate systems so that your struggles stay invisible. Most people do not start masking because they're fake. They start masking at some point. They learned at some point they learned that the natural way of moving, speaking, and forgetting, interrupting, struggling to start, well, maybe zoning out. When you do these things, what happens is you get judged. At some point, they've been judged, they've been corrected, they've been shamed, they've been excluded from the group for these things. So masking becomes a survival strategy. It helps protect you from embarrassment, from being hurt emotionally. It protects you from a stigma or conflict, even though it often comes at a real cognitive and emotional cost. And this is the part I really hope you'll understand. Masking may help you blend in, but it's going to leave you exhausted. When you spend all day monitoring your face, your tone, your movement, your attention, your behaviors, you're using up all the energy that other people never had to spend in the first place. And that's why so many people with ADHD look high functioning on the outside and completely depleted on the inside. Masking can protect your social image, but it can also contribute to stress and burnout and a painful feeling that people only accept the version of you that is carefully curated. A helpful distinction is this: coping supports you, but masking hides you. A coping strategy reduces stress and helps you function, while masking is often about making sure that no one sees that you're struggling at all. Now that we know what masking is, let's painting the ship so no one sees any of the holes. We have to talk about what happens when you do it for too long. Imagine steering a massive ship while also having to run around the deck, making sure every single passenger thinks the ride is perfectly smooth. You're monitoring your face, your tone, and how much space you're taking up, whether or not you're talking too much, whether or not you look like you're paying attention. You're doing the job of living while simultaneously managing everyone else's perception of how you are living. No wonder you're tired. When you get home at the end of the day and completely collapse, it isn't because the day itself was inherently exhausting. It's because you spent the entire day performing. Eventually, your brain and your body can't keep up the performance anymore. The crew below deck, who have been bailing out water and working double shifts just to maintain the illusion of a perfect ship, finally will stage a mutiny. This is ADHD burnout. When the mask completely drops because you literally do not have the energy to hold it up anymore. You might find yourself unable to complete the simplest tasks, withdrawing from friends, or feeling even completely numb. The most awful, well, in my opinion, one of the most awful parts of masking is that it often delays people getting help, because you have become so good at hiding your struggles. When you finally ask for support, people might say, "But you don't look like you have ADHD," or "You've always managed so well." They're praising the mask, not realizing that it is that mask is suffocating the person under the mask. The goal that we want is a safe harbor. It isn't to suddenly drop the mask in every area of your life like by tomorrow. In some situations, the strict corporate job or dealing with unsupportive people, masking is a necessary survival tool. It protects you. But the goal is to find a safe harbor. You need spaces and people, or even just moments alone where you can just drop the act, where you can let your eyes glaze over, let your body fidget, speak without perfectly filtering your thoughts, and just exist without monitoring how you're being perceived. The first step is simply to notice when you're doing it. When you're laughing at jokes that you didn't hear because you were zoned out, or when you're forcing eye contact even though it makes you uncomfortable. When you're hiding your hyperfixations because you're afraid someone's going to think they're weird. Once you start noticing the mask, you can gently ask yourself, do I need to wear this mask right now? Every time you allow yourself to just be your messy, authentic, neurodivergent self, you give your crew a break. You stop wasting your precious energy maintaining an illusion, and you can finally use that energy to actually sail the ship. Now, if you have ADHD, people have probably given you the exact same piece of advice your entire life. Well, we'll use a planner. They hand you a beautifully bound, color coded notebook and promise it will fix your life. No. But for a pirate sailing an ADHD ship, a neurotypical planner isn't a helpful navigation tool. Instead, it quickly becomes a daily written record of everything that you're failing to do. We all know the cycle. You buy a brand new planner because it's shiny and the novelty of it gives your brain a massive temporary hit of dopamine. And for about 3 days, you feel completely in control of your destiny, writing out perfect lists with different colored pens. And then you forget to open the book one morning, the dopamine wears off, and the planner gets shoved in a drawer where you inevitably find it 3 months later or a year later, and it triggers a wave of reaction. I'm sorry, it triggers a wave of rejection sensitive dysphoria. That expensive notebook is no longer a tool, it's a physical monument to your shame. Here's why traditional planners fail us. They are rigid maps designed for calm waters and steady, predictable winds. They assume that you schedule a task for 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, you will magically have the executive function to do it right at that exact moment. But as we know, an ADHD ship operates on sudden storms and stagnant waters. You cannot predict when the wind will blow, so demanding a strict daily consistency from your brain is an unwinnable battle. So I'm giving you permission right now to throw that planner overboard. Stop trying to navigate using the map that wasn't drawn for your specific ocean. Because of how our working memory operates, ADHD captains have to sail by sight. If it's something out of sight, like closed inside a book or tucked below deck somewhere in a drawer, it literally ceases to exist in your mind for the moment. Instead of hiding your life in a planner, you need a loud, visual, external system. Use giant whiteboards, stick neon notes on your bathroom mirror, or leave your gym bag right in front of the door so you'll trip over it. Take the shame out of your organization and build a system that works for the ship that you're steering. Discuss how the ADHD brain needs urgency to function. Talk about this with your family. Discuss it with your partner, your parents. You can do this. Earlier, we talked about how much an ADHD brain is a ship without wind and how it constantly hunts for a storm just to get moving. Well, for most of your life, you've probably relied on natural disasters to sail your ship. You wait until the absolute last possible second to write your paper or pay your bill or pack for a trip. You wait until the hurricane of pure panic sets in because that panic floods your brain with adrenaline and dopamine, which finally gives you that wind that you need just to start. But relying on hurricanes to get around is a bit dangerous. And it's kind of why you're so burned out. So if we know the ship needs wind and we know our brains don't produce a natural breeze, we have to learn how to summon a controlled squall. We need to create artificial urgency. Instead of waiting for a real crisis, you have to manufacture low stakes, safe crises that trick your brain into generating just enough dopamine to get a move on. You aren't trying to scare yourself. You're just trying to make a boring task feel high stakes enough to matter. One of the best ways to create safe wind is the strategy called body doubling. If you can't get yourself to fold the laundry or answer emails, invite a friend over or get on a video call with a coworker. They don't even have to help you with the task. Just having another person on deck creates an immediate sense of social accountability. Their presence acts as a gentle, continuous gust of wind that keeps you anchored to the present moment instead of drifting off course. Another way to hack urgency is to turn mundane chores into a race against the clock. If you're looking at a messy kitchen and that paralyzes you, don't tell yourself you have to clean the whole thing. Instead, set a timer for 8 minutes. Put on your favorite high energy song and challenge yourself to see how many dishes you can load before the alarm goes off. By adding a timer and a sense of competition, you're feeding your brain the novelty and urgency that it's craving. It completely bypasses the broken bridge of executive dysfunction. When you look at a massive task, like I need to clean the entire house or finish my quarterly report, your ADHD brain tries to calculate the entire journey all at once. You look at the horizon, realize how far away it is, and your executive function immediately short circuits. To a brain with dopamine deficiency, a huge project feels like an impossible, bottomless pit of effort. So you freeze. You sit on the couch staring at the wall, being crushed by the weight of everything that you haven't even started yet. Now, to get moving, you have to completely shrink the map. You have to lower the bar until it's lying flat on the deck. And this is where we use micro goals or the bare minimum method. The goal isn't to cross the ocean. The goal is just to untie one rope. If taking a shower feels like too much work because it involves getting undressed and adjusting the water, washing your hair, drying off, getting dressed, yada, 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 shrink it. Tell yourself, I'm just going to turn the water on. That's it. That's the only goal. The bare minimum method works because of physics. A ship in motion tends to stay in motion. The hardest part of any task for an ADHD brain is the transition, the initiation. Getting the heavy ship to move that first inch takes a massive amount of energy. But once you turn the water on, once you open the laptop, you have successfully bypassed the broken bridge of executive dysfunction. Often, once you do the bare minimum, the momentum gently carries you forward into the rest of the task. And if it doesn't, if you just turn the water on and turn it off, that's still a victory. You still commanded the ship. You made the ship do something. We've all been taught that doing the bare minimum is lazy or it's shameful. We get shamed for it. Well, I want you to unlearn that. For an ADHD captain, the bare minimum is a highly effective survival tool. On the days when there's absolutely no wind, when you are exhausted and the brain fog is really thick, the bare minimum keeps you going. It keeps you from sinking. It's how you stay afloat until the storm passes. Stop demanding perfection from a brain that's already working twice as hard just to tread water. One of the biggest misconceptions about ADHD is that you cannot pay attention to anything. But as an ADHD captain, you know this isn't true. The problem isn't a complete lack of attention, it's a complete lack of or a complete inability to regulate that attention. Most of the time, you're stranded on the windless doldrums, but occasionally your brain finds a shiny new hobby or a fascinating puzzle or a high stakes project. It catches a massive, unstoppable gale of a wind. This is what we call hyperfocus. When you catch the hyperfocus wave, your ship is suddenly flying across the ocean at breakneck speed, and it feels incredible. The brain that is usually starved for dopamine, this intense slipstream of productivity and fascination is completely intoxicating. You become completely locked in. You can learn how to build furniture in a weekend, read an entire novel overnight, or redesign a website for 12 hours straight without looking up. And in these moments, you are the fastest, most capable ship on the water. But, always a but, it seems, there is the danger of the hyperfocus gale. When the ship is moving that fast, the captain completely forgets to take care of the crew. Because your brain is so locked onto this rare source of dopamine, it mutes your body's physical signals. You don't realize you're thirsty. You can forget to eat. You can even forget that you need to use the bathroom. And time blindness is a thing, and it can take over. You sail right past your bedtime and your daily obligations. And when the wind finally dies down, you're left with hyperfocus hangover. Your body is depleted. Your crew is starving. Your ship is exhausted. We don't want to kill your hyperfocus. It is genuinely one of your brain's greatest superpowers. But we have to learn how to ride the wave safely so you don't sink the ship. When you feel that intense wind is picking up, you need to throw down a safety anchor before you get completely swept away. Set a loud, obnoxious alarm in the other room for 2 hours. And when it goes off, it forces you to physically stand up, break that trance, drink a glass of water, check on your crew. And then if you want, you can go right back to sailing. But you have to make sure that the ship is surviving the speed. So let's talk to the partners and the parents for a minute. If you're a neurotypical partner or parent watching an ADHD loved one, you are essentially standing on the shore watching a ship that seems to be stubbornly refusing to leave the harbor. You have your own ship, and when you want to sail, you just catch the breeze and go. So when you watch your partner or your child sitting on the couch surrounded by unpacked boxes and unwashed dishes, it's incredibly easy to assume that they're making a conscious choice to just be lazy. You assume they are leaving all the heavy lifting for you. This misunderstanding leads to probably the most common and destructive phrase in a relationship with someone with ADHD. Well, if you cared about me, you would just do it. You think to yourself, if they cared about my stress, they would remember to take out the trash, or if they respected me and my time, they would be ready to leave when they said they would. But you're applying neurotypical rules to a neurodivergent brain. Remembering the broken bridge we talked about earlier, your your partner is standing in the captain's quarters, desperately wanting to do the task because they love you, but the communication line to their body is severed. Their lack of action is an executive function failure, not a measure of their love for you. When you respond to the paralysis with frustration, sighs, accusations of laziness, you're doing a lot of damage. People with ADHD already carry a lifetime of shame, and many experience rejection sensitive dysphoria, meaning your criticism literally registers in their brain as an unbearable emotional pain. They're already firing cannonballs into their own hull every day. They're deeply frustrated with themselves, and the absolute last thing they need is friendly fire coming from the shore. If you want to help your partner or child, you have to stop yelling at them for their ship not having any wind. Instead, you need to work together to navigate the unique chemistry of their brain. Ask them what kind of wind they need today. Offer to body double by simply sitting in the room while they tackle a dreaded chore. Help them build a visual external system instead of buying them another planner that they're going to lose and they're going to fail to use. Most importantly, become a safe harbor, a place where they can drop the mask, stop performing, and just be loved for who they are. To understand why your partner constantly forgets things, we have to look at the ship's cargo hold, which represents their working memory. In a neurotypical brain, a request like taking out the trash gets stored in this hold until it's completed. In an ADHD brain, it has a cargo hold with no floor, meaning if a task isn't acted on immediately, it falls straight through the bottom into the ocean. Because your neurotypical brain easily holds on to these tasks, you naturally assume that if your partner drops one, they simply didn't care enough to remember. You falsely tell yourself that if they truly loved and respected you, they would hold on to that request. This is a painful trap that unfairly ties their neurological working memory deficits into their moral character and their affection for you. Now, for you captains out there with ADHD, if a task is completely out of sight, it genuinely vanishes from their active reality until a visual cue brings it back. When you criticize them for this neurological slip, it frequently triggers a severe physical, emotional pain of rejection sensitive dysphoria. They're not maliciously ignoring you. They are typically devastated that their broken cargo hold has let you down again. You must completely decouple your partner's working memory from their love for you. Forgetting a chore is not a referendum on your relationship. It is simply a lost box in the ocean. When you stop taking these forgotten tasks personally, you can work together to leave bold visual cues on the deck where the captain can actually see them. When you watch your ADHD partner struggling to navigate, your first instinct is often just to jump onto their ship and take the wheel yourself because it's faster and less frustrating. You start managing their appointments, doing their chores, and acting as their personal alarm clock. While this comes from a place of love, it quickly creates an exhausting parent child dynamic that is going to breed resentment on both sides. Enabling happens when you completely take over the tasks that your partner's brain struggles to initiate, essentially doing everything for them. When you constantly sail their ship for them, you inadvertently reinforce their internal belief that they are incapable of managing their own life. Now, over time, this erodes their self esteem. It triggers deep, painful shame that is associated with that rejection sensitive dysphoria. It makes them feel like they're a constant burden. True support, on the other hand, means helping them build the external structures they need to sail their own ship successfully. Instead of taking over, you act as an ally on the shore, who helps them design better navigation tools that actually work for their unique brain chemistry. Support is collaborative, it's empowering, and it focuses on creating completely shame-free environment where they can safely practice their steering. A perfect example of support is sitting down together to set up highly visual shared calendar app with a loud automatic reminder. You are not taking on the mental load of remembering their appointments for them. You are simply helping them construct a reliable external system. By building these accessible structures, you give your partner the tools they need to succeed independently without completely draining your own energy. Now, to the people out there listening with ADHD, for your entire life, the world has tried to judge you by the standards of the neurotypical merchant ship. You have been told that you are broken because you struggle to sail in a straight line at a slow, predictable speed along a standard, boring trade route. But you are not a broken merchant ship. You're a pirate ship, and you were built for entirely different waters. Because your brain constantly hunts for dopamine and thrives on urgency, you possess an incredible hidden, I am going to call it a superpower, but remember, it comes with a cost. You are the master of the storm. When the real crisis hits, when the winds are howling and everybody else is paralyzed by panicking, your ADHD brain suddenly becomes perfectly calm, incredibly capable. While neurotypical brains short circuit in chaos, your brain finally feels at home, making you exceptionally good at problem solving in high stress, fast paced environments. Your inability to think in a straight line is exactly what makes you so intensely creative. An ADHD brain does not process information sequentially. It processes it like a massive interconnected web. It allows you to see the brilliant solutions and connections that neurotypical people completely miss. You are naturally wired to question the rules, challenge the status quo, and discover uncharted islands that conventional thinkers would never find on their own. We talked earlier about how painful rejection sensitive dysphoria can be because your emotions are always playing at a maximum volume. But I want you to remember that the exact same switch that makes your pain so loud also controls your joy, your passion, and your empathy. You love fiercely. You champion the underdog relentlessly. And when you're excited about something, your enthusiasm is brilliantly contagious to everybody around you. Having ADHD in a neurotypical world is undeniably exhausting, but your brain is not a tragedy. The goal of this journey is not to cure your pirate nature or force yourself to become a quiet, compliant merchant ship. The goal is to finally stop apologizing for how you sail. Learn to safely navigate your own unique chemistry and start using your incredible storms to change the world. In our oceanic world, the box the neurotypical people thrive in is the established trade route. Their brains are perfectly designed to follow standard operating procedures, strict schedules, and highly predictable systems. When they have a clear step by step map, they feel completely safe, capable, and highly productive. But because their brains rely on this rigid structure, neurotypical thinkers often become deeply uncomfortable when they're asked to navigate without a map. If you take away their established procedures and force them to think completely outside the box, their cognitive systems tend to shut down. They rely heavily on the safety of known boundaries to function effectively in their daily lives. Now, an ADHD brain, however, was fundamentally built to live completely off the edge of the map. You do not just occasionally think outside the box. You practically live in the uncharted waters where no established procedures exist. When forced to sail the boring, repetitive trade routes, your dopamine drops and your brain completely disengages from the task. Because you are not confined by traditional rules, you are naturally able to look in bold new directions that others completely miss. While a neurotypical crew panics in the unknown, Your ADHD brain thrives on the novelty of inventing entirely new, atypical ways of solving a problem. This natural ability to see the world from a completely different perspective is the exact reason why neurodivergent minds drive so much incredible innovation. So let me ask you this: where do the innovators get their ideas from? If they never let their thoughts go outside the box, how likely is it that we would have the inventions that made life such a wonder to behold? If you ever doubt the power of the neurodivergent brain, you just need to look at the history books. The greatest discoveries in human history were not made by the standard merchant ships sailing safely around the established predictable trade routes. They were made by pirate captains who were told that their ideas were impossible simply because their brains refused to stay inside of that traditional box. Now take Leonardo da Vinci. Now, he is widely believed by modern medical historians to have had severe ADHD. He was notorious for intense bursts of hyperfocus, followed by complete loss of interest, leaving countless masterpieces and brilliant inventions half finished. But because his brain refused to separate subjects, he interconnected anatomy, engineering, painting to create ideas that were centuries ahead of his time. Thomas Edison, he was essentially kicked out of traditional schooling as a child because his teachers claimed his mind wandered too much and he was incapable of learning the normal way. He could not follow the rigid step-by-step maps handed him by authority figures. Yet, that exact restless, boundary-pushing brain allowed him to test thousands of unusual materials to invent the practical light bulb, a process of relentless trial and error that would have exhausted the neurotypical mind. Now, let's talk about my favorite, or one of them, Nikola Tesla. He is one of the most brilliant historical examples of a mind that completely ignored the established safe maps of his era. While the rest of the scientific world was rigidly focused on the limitations of direct current, Tesla envisioned the impossible, an alternating current system that could light up the entire globe. When Tesla first proposed his radical ideas for alternating current and wireless energy, the traditional scientific community openly mocked him. Industry giants operating safely inside that neurotypical box claimed his systems were dangerous, wildly impractical, and completely unworkable. They were navigating by the old rules of physics and could not comprehend a captain sailing so radically far beyond the edge of the known map. Tesla possessed an extraordinary ability to harness intense hyperfocus and visual thinking. This allowed him to construct and run complex motors entirely inside his own imagination before ever building a physical prototype. When he finally debuted his alternating current system at the 1893 World's Fair, he illuminated the grounds and completely shattered the limits of what society believed could be done. Tesla changed the fundamental way humanity harnesses energy, specifically because he refused to conform to the traditional step-by-step procedures of his time. His legacy is a powerful reminder that when the world tells you that your idea is impossible, it usually just means that they lack the visionary brain chemistry to see it done. They don't have what's required to envision it themselves. Now, Tesla's relationship with the rest of society is a classic, heartbreaking example of what happens when a brilliant pirate captain tries to sail inside of a merchant fleet. He was highly intuitive, profoundly connected to the laws of nature and energy, and he was driven by a deep ethical desire to use technology to advance all of humanity, not just generate profit. But socially, he was deeply withdrawn, often misunderstood, and completely struggled to conform to the basic social structures required by the business world. Society loved the magic that he conjured, and for a time he was celebrated in New York high society as a wizard who could make lights dance in his hands. But his feedback loop with society was almost entirely one directional. He poured his brilliant breakthroughs out into the world, but he struggled to receive or navigate the institutional support, the business structures, and interpersonal relationships needed in order to protect himself. He had very few close friends, mostly creatives like Mark Twain and John Muir, who appreciated his unconventional mind. But he clashed violently with the rigid, profit driven businessmen of his era. When Tesla proposed ideas that completely broke the established rules, like his alternating current system or his massive plans for wireless global energy, the traditional scientific and business communities mocked him. Men like Thomas Edison operated safely inside the box of trial and error and direct current, and they ruthlessly attacked Tesla for sailing so radically off the edge of the known map. Tesla's brain allowed him to build a modern world, but living outside the box took a massive toll on him. He lacked the neurotypical ability to play office politics, to secure his patents properly against aggressive capitalists, or compromise his massive visions to please investors. Towards the end of his life, society dismissed this brilliant innovator as a mad scientist because his obsessions and social isolation became too uncomfortable for them to handle. He died impoverished and alone, a tragic casualty of a society that gladly took his treasure but refused to understand him as a man. Now, these innovators changed the world specifically because they did not think in straight lines. When society told them it cannot be done, their brains simply heard, it cannot be done using the old map. Your neurodivergent mind shares that exact same chemistry, meaning you are not broken for struggling with the ordinary. You are wired to pioneer the extraordinary. Now, I want to leave you with a challenge. I want you to walk around your house today and find one major friction point, a friction point that is a specific spot where your ship consistently tries to run aground. It's a place where you keep trying to use a neurotypical map, failing, and then beat yourself up because of it. Okay. Maybe your friction point is the laundry chair sitting in the corner of your bedroom. A neurotypical rule says laundry must be folded into perfectly neat squares and placed into designated dresser drawers because that multi-step process requires too much executive function. You just pile the clean clothes on a chair for 3 weeks, completely overwhelmed by the steps that you haven't done. The challenge is to solve this friction point in an ADHD way. We're going to do this the pirate way. That means completely throwing out the supposed to and building a system that actually matches how your brain chemistry works. If you hate folding laundry, stop folding it. Go buy a cheap set of open lidless bins and line them up by your closet. Have one bin for shirts, one bin for pants, one for underwear. Then the clothes come out of the dryer. You literally just toss them into the correct bin. Your clothes are clean, they're separated, and they're off the floor. If you want them ironed, that may pose a problem. That's a different issue. Anyway, is this idea Pinterest perfect? No, but it removes the broken bridge of executive dysfunction entirely. It turns an impossible chore into a 10-second basketball game. I want you to give yourself permission to be beautifully unconventional in your own home. If you forget to brush your teeth at night because you're too tired to stand at the bathroom sink, keep a toothbrush and a bottle of water on your nightstand. If your vegetables always rot in the crisper drawers because they're out of sight, put your condiments in the drawer and put the vegetables in the direct eye level shelves. Take shame out of your daily life. Stop fighting the way your brain naturally works and start designing a ship where your pirate crew can actually thrive. If you keep throwing your clothes on that chair instead of putting them in the hamper in the closet, stop trying to force yourself to use the closet. Just move the hamper to the chair. Work with your brain's natural current, not against it. Now, for your entire life, you've probably felt like a defective captain sailing a ship and fundamentally a broken ship. Because society is built by and for neurotypical merchant ships, every time you ran aground, you were told it was a flaw in your character. Please hear me on this. Your brain is not broken. You are not a failure. The only reason you've been struggling so much is that you've been trying to navigate your ship using a merchant's map. That traditional map relies on steady winds, rigid daily schedules, predictable routines that your neurodivergent brain simply does not possess. It is time to stop blaming yourself for failing to follow a map that was never designed for you and your specific brain chemistry. It wasn't. When you finally accept that you have a dopamine deficient, novelty seeking, wildly creative brain, the heavy burden of shame starts to wash away. You can finally start drawing your own map based on visual cues, controlled urgency, the safe harbors that you actually need to thrive. You stop fighting the reality of the ocean and start learning how to actually harness your own storms. You're not lazy and you're not careless and you're not too much. You're a highly capable captain who has spent a lifetime surviving the rough waters without the proper navigation tools. Now that you finally understand how your brilliant, unconventional ship actually works, it's time to take the wheel, drop the mask, and show the world what you can do. For years, you have been measuring your daily success against people who are rowing simple neurotypical rowboats. A rowboat is highly predictable, it's easy to maneuver in calm waters, and requires very little wind to get moving. You have been unfairly judging yourself for struggles to paddle, completely missing the fact that you're actually at the helm of a massive, complex galleon. Because the galleon is so large, it requires a tremendous amount of wind to get going, which is why every day calm water tasks feel completely paralyzing. But when a massive storm hits and a true crisis emerges, the rowboats scramble for the shore while your brain finally gets the gale force winds it's been craving. Your ADHD brain is uniquely wired for crisis management, allowing you to remain perfectly calm, decisive, and very capable while everyone else is panicking. The massive ship size also means your vessel has an incredible capacity for emotional depth. While the intense emotional wiring of ADHD can cause the pain of rejection sensitive dysphoria, that same exact switch gives you a profound, unmatched level of empathy. You feel the world deeply. You feel fiercely, or you fiercely protect the underdog, and you possess a massive cargo hold of compassion that a standard rowboat can't carry, can't understand. A galleon is not designed to paddle around in the safe, predictable shallows. It's built to cross oceans and discover completely new horizons. Your inability to think in a straight, predictable line is the exact reason you are so brilliantly creative and capable outside of the box innovation. When you stop punishing yourself for not being a simple rowboat, you can finally unleash the massive world changing potential of the ship that you are meant to captain. Now, we've mapped the dopamine doldrums, examined the broken bridge of executive dysfunction, and learned how to drop anger during a fierce emotional storm of rejection sensitive dysphoria. You now possess the true blueprints to your own incredible vessel. You no longer have to navigate by the rigid neurotypical maps that were designed to make you feel like a failure. It is time to stop apologizing for the space that you take up and the brilliantly unconventional way you sail. The world does not need another predictable, quiet merchant ship. It desperately needs the creativity, the deep empathy, and the fierce innovation that only a pirate captain is going to bring. So hoist your colors, drop that heavy mask that you've been carrying for so long, and finally allow your crew to breathe. Remember, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor, and your brain was built to master the absolute wildest oceans on earth. Take the wheel. Trust your unique wind and go discover the horizons that you have been told were impossible. So, until our next voyage, take care of your ship, protect your crew, and keep sailing by your own stars. I am Lee Perry. I am the Pirate Therapist. Take good care of your crew this week. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you then.